Welcome, everybody. It's so exciting to be able to be speaking with all of you, to be able to introduce our upcoming concert, a concert that really centers around the amazing confluence of composers and pianists. And we have one of those amazing composer pianists with us as our special guest. Joining us via Zoom is Stewart Goodyear. Stewart, welcome.
Hello, everyone. Really,
And our music director, Alain Trudel, is joining us.
Hello.
And I'm Merwin. I'm a violinist and artistic administrator of the orchestra. So, absolutely excited for us to be coming back together. A lot of history on this screen, but I just wanted to, maybe pour a glass out for what was supposed to be. We were actually supposed to be doing this a couple months later with what would have been a really interesting and unusual collaboration. It would have been the chance for us to play a piece of yours for the first time.
that's right. So
So
maybe
we were
sometime in
supposed
the future. I'm looking forward to that one
Oh
day.
yes. Oh yes. This is a next rendezvous. And
Yes,
actually, I'd like to thank you so much for being flexible and coming earlier, playing a different piece, not playing your piece. This is flexibility as we all need right now in these times. And we're really grateful. I mean, you're a true friend of the orchestra, and that's really appreciated.
my
And
pleasure.
of course, I want to play that piece of yours because I heard it in La Naudière. And I
Yes,
went like, oh, I got to do this.
excellent, excellent.
Yeah.
So let's do a teaser for a concert yet to be kind of finalized, but talk a little bit about Callaloo and what we were going to have with this giant orchestra that we can't quite fit on the stage right now, but
Well,
hopefully in the very near future.
this piece, Kalaloo, is certainly not about social distancing. It's definitely about everyone coming together. And Kalaloo is very much inspired by Carnival. So I'm half Trinidadian and half British. So I always wanted to pay homage to my Trinidadian background. And this was a project that began when I was 14, and there were a few false starts here and there. And just recently, around 4 years ago, all of the ideas just gelled. And it was from my last visit to Trinidad, visiting my relatives and my uncles and aunts there, and experiencing Carnival for the first time. And so I was just immersed in the gorgeous sounds of Calypso. And this piece, this suite that I wrote for piano and orchestra, is my own personal postcard, if you will, of my visit to Trinidad and just about my heritage.
So I know that both of you are composers in your own right and performers, active performers. What is the difference in kind of in your approach when you're performing your own work? And Stuart, I'll start with you. When you're performing like something that you've written, is there a different sense of responsibility? Is there more freedom? How does it feel, or do you just try to approach it the same?
I definitely have to approach it as an interpreter. Sometimes when I'm composing something, I somehow forget that this is a piece that this will now be heard to the public, and it has to be as clear and as defined as if I was going to be interpreting a piece by another composer. So I have to look at it from a picture standpoint, just separate myself from a composer's point of view, and look at it from an audience point of view and a collaboration, etc.
So, Alain, when you're
Yeah.
conducting a piece of your own, is it possible for you to kind of turn off your composer brain? Are you thinking, oh, I should have changed that. I should have given the second violins more melodies or something like that?
Just like that, the
For
second violin.
instance.
Okay. Or solo and the principal second, right?
Oh, of course.
Okay. Okay. So, well, for me, it's only recently I've been able to conduct the piece with as much fervor and as much intensity as I do the music of other composers. It always felt really bizarre when I have one of my own pieces on the program. Maybe it's my Canadian heritage. I'm feeling, oh, I'm sorry, I don't want to disturb you with my own piece, and I feel like I give it less rehearsal time. I give it, and after a few years, the composer started to complain. So I had to start to take this guy seriously a little bit more. And no, but it's true. I mean, it took me a long time before saying, okay, well, this is an actual piece of music. And that's why I didn't program a lot of my music. And now I am programming a little bit more. There's always, when you're the conductors, there's always this danger of, like in Mahler days, the days of Gustav Mahler, everybody said, well, he just took this gig to program his own music all the time. And so you don't want to look like you're acting as an egoistical person. I mean, I almost never program my music, so it's not that bad. But at the same time, I mean, even like you guys played my quartet. No, you're playing my quartet in a concert, and you played it 2 summers ago, and it's a very old piece. I wrote it when I was a teenager, but I go like, there's a certain I'm a bit pudic about it sometimes, like, oh,
Yeah.
I like to be far away when you play my music. But unfortunately, when it's for orchestra, sometimes I conduct it. I have a few pieces that have been conducted by other people, and often I find that they do it better than me. Not that I'm a bad conductor. I'm fine. But it's just that it's just that they have more distance than me. And as you said, do you think this part could be better? This part, I always think everything could be better when I conduct my music. I'm going like, because you evolve every day, right? So a piece of music is like a snapshot. It's like a picture. When you finish, the day you finish the piece, then it starts to take a life of its own. But it's always that piece at that time. Like I was talking about that quartet, wrote that when I was between 16 and 18. So now I listen to it, I'm like, you have to accept that it's something from that moment and leave it, in the space where it lives, it belongs, and it's its own thing.
Yeah.
I've had a problem with that. That was difficult. I'm a bit better at it now.
Well, the very first piece that we're going to be playing on this concert is actually by somebody who used to call Toledo home, Stanley Cowell, an amazing jazz pianist. He really kind of seized the legacy of Art Tatum. He actually wrote a piano concerto for the orchestra dedicated to Art Tatum. And we approached him for the 60th anniversary of the Toledo Symphony to write this fanfare and fond remembrance. And it's really interesting because with the idea of a fanfare, you've got this kind of very brassy feel to it, but there was this really interesting section, this fond remembrance, where he dedicated it to his hometown piano teacher. And so I just wanted to kind of maybe use this as a chance for you guys to reminisce a little bit about maybe those teachers who maybe kind of touched you from your hometown or something. So could you maybe, and I'll start with Stewart, kind of like, who is that first teacher who maybe you have that fond remembrance of?
It's hard to pick one teacher. I have to say that the whole environment of Toronto very much nurtured me. And I felt like, being born just maybe 3 blocks away from the Royal Conservatory, there was just this energy that was very exciting, and I wanted to be a part of it. I was hearing classical music almost from the very beginning when I was around 3 years old. Classical music was always a part of my family, as well as rock and roll and rhythm and blues and calypso. So I felt like somehow the atmosphere was my mentor. And then, attending the conservatory and learning not only piano, but violin, recorder, and I had a composition mentor there. They all gave me that foundation.
Yeah. How about you, Alain?
Well, the word foundation is very important, I think, because for me, there are two instances that were very important for me. The first, I have a very different story than you, Stewart. I started, both my parents were jazz musicians, but I started playing music only at 12, and I joined a municipal brass band. And very much like what we, El Sistema now is very popular everywhere. And they try to transpose the same thing in every city, which doesn't work, of course, because everybody has a different reality. So you can't do a blueprint and put it there. But that's another topic for another time. But when I was young, there was a group that's way before that, just a brass band that was formed by a policeman, somebody who had an ice cream parlor, somebody with a trophy engraving shop. But they all loved music. and they all decided to offer the kids from the streets. It was a kind of poor neighborhood. We didn't have instruments, anything, a place to hang out, to do some music, to learn about. Most people didn't, music was a tool to learn about life, to learn about self-discipline, to learn about. I don't mean in the sense that the first degree self-discipline of life, making good choices and a healthy lifestyle. And but through being together, playing as a group, I've always learned music as a group when I was young. It's normal. I mean, I play an orchestra instrument, so it's we always learn together, the brass especially, and that was very important for me. And then when I got into high school, well, I was in high school, but I changed high school because I wanted to go in a special program. But you had to audition for it, and the guy made my life hell to get into it because he thought I was a bum, right? Because I come from a very poor family and all that. So I had to show him that actually I was for real. I could read music, I could do all that, and then he took me under his wing. My high school teacher was like my real mentor. Like Raymond Grignet was his name. He's passed away. He has passed away now. Old French man. He was an electrician in the Second World War. Came to Cincinnati, Ohio connection,
Wow.
to play bass clarinet in the opera orchestra after the war. Wind up in Halifax playing in some big band there, and wind up teaching in Montreal high school. And that was actually something he really wanted to do. So it wasn't like I teach high school because I couldn't have a career. I teach high school because that's my career. And I was really passionate about it. And we were now the high school, that's the high school I went to. We're 30 in that special music project. And now they're 800 in music in that school. It's public school. And no help from anybody. It's just so he was very, very influential in my way of thinking, my way of thinking of community, my way of thinking about music also, and sharing music.
It's amazing that Stanley Cowell chooses to use brass instruments to pay tribute to his hometown piano teacher, kind of bringing together those worlds of brass and music education. Could you talk about Stanley's writing in this fanfare?
Yes, of course. But it's not that surprising because when you want to celebrate,
Yeah.
brass instruments are never a bad choice, right? And if you want to celebrate after the concert, that's something else. They're also not a bad choice. But if you, I think that what he did is it's a little bit of a pianistic idiom that he's writing for, like the chords and all that. And it's not really that classical. It moves a lot. And usually a fanfare is very noble, and it starts a little bit that way, but then it goes into something that has a real groove to it, which is nice because usually fanfares, they're very stately, and boom, and then it's finished, and thank you, and we're very moved. But this one actually moves a little bit. So, and we did something special for this performance, which since the beginning of the season we've been playing the fanfare around the proscenium. But now we played it on stage. One of the reasons because we need to be closer, still social distance, but a bit closer because of that rhythm that there's in there. And I think that's something, both the language, the rhythm, and all that, it makes it a fanfare, yes, but kind of a celebratory brass and percussion piece.
It's interesting because we talk about those grooves that Stanley's able to just instantly create.
Yeah.
And I really think that with this next piece, Coleridge Taylor Perkinson's Sinfonietta, you can really feel that as well. There's some movements in there that really have some wonderful grooves in them. It's really funny because he was able to straddle worlds so effortlessly. He was the music director of the Symphony of the New World, but then he wrote ballet scores for Alvin Ailey. He was the pianist for the Max Roach Quartet. He wrote arrangements for Marvin Gaye and Harry Belafonte. He just had this really diverse career. And this Sinfonietta, written when he was just 22 years old, very rooted in a classical tradition, but definitely influenced by his jazz proficiency in his language. And I'm speaking to two people who can speak to that infinitely more than myself. I know, Stewart, you recently just had a release of a single, Congate. Could you talk a little bit more about kind of how that kind of ties into what we were talking about?
Well, Kankote, as I mentioned before, I came from a very eclectic musical background, and my dad, who I never knew because he died of cancer a month before I was born, I knew him through his LP collection, and he had Led Zeppelin, he had Cat Stevens, he had Miles Davis, like a whole spectrum of various musical styles. So that was my childhood soundtrack growing up. I would just be playing all of these LPs. So there was never a wall for me between any style of music. I just loved it all. When I composed Kalalu, I sometimes thought of if there were various ways of doing versions of Kalalu, what would it sound like? And for the longest time, I envisioned a band consisting of piano. So it would be almost like a jazz calypso fusion. So there would be piano, there would definitely be steel drum, trap set, bass guitar, and electric guitar. And um, there was a group that was formed. I had my first all Goodyear concert in Toronto 2 years ago, and I met these dear people. We formed a group together, and we did the band version of the second movement of Kalalu, which I entitled Congo Te. Now, Congo Te, the Trinidad is like, chickens coming home to roost, or, Karma will get back to you eventually. One day, Congo Te. That is the Trinidadian expression, and it can be used in various contexts. So I thought, especially the notes that keep going over and over and over again. If one was going to put words to it, it definitely comes up to one day, Congo Day. So I thought, this is perfect. That is my title. And
Yeah.
I released the single just a few months ago.
Mhm. That's so exciting. I mean, so you have a lot of different kind of recording projects kind of in the works and that have just been recently released. And of course, one of them ties in very specifically to this concert as well. So you have a Beethoven set
Yes.
that's like that. I mean, so one of the things that for those of you who don't know that the Stewart has done I think multiple times at this point is performing serious marathons of Beethoven. I would say that as a violinist, trying to do all 10 violin and piano sonatas would be a bit of a stretch. And you just tossed that off a couple of weeks ago, 2, 3.
Yeah, not long ago at all, just
Yeah.
last month.
So after doing the 32 piano sonatas, the 10 violin and piano sonatas, that's got to be cake, right?
Not quite. But this is a project that I always wanted to do. I always wanted to perform the violin and piano sonatas.
Really, the piano and violin sonatas.
Piano and violin sonatas.
I was being a little instrument centric there, yeah.
And so I got a call from Merwin of Kerner Hall saying that James Ennis's piano partner was unable to fly to Toronto to do these concerts. Would it be possible for me to learn the piano part of those
Yeah.
sonatas and to work with James Ennis? We worked together previously around 13 years ago, so it was nice to collaborate with him again, and it was a lovely project and a great collaboration. Had a lot of fun.
Very cool.
So that was a great highlight of last year.
That's amazing. So we moving to Beethoven really just I mean there's such a long line of composer pianists. I mean if we wish to include like, organists like Bach, if we want to, of course Mozart, and then after that Chopin, Liszt,
Perhaps your favorite, Merwin.
Did I mention Liszt? I guess I
Franz
did.
Liszt, yes.
But Beethoven, of course, really has this almost magnetic pull, in this, and I know that for both of you, Beethoven is really, really central in your artistic life. I think. Could you maybe, Stewart, you've kind of immersed yourself in Beethoven, really in a very unusual way, kind of really tracing a chronology and trying to put that in a very concentrated amount of time. What would you say his kind of like tracing that journey multiple times? How does that impact your performance of a single concerto?
When I started doing what I call the sonatas, sonatathon,
The
a
sonata.
marathon of performing all of the sonatas in one day, and The reason why that project came about was that's when I first heard it when I was age 3.
Mhm.
I heard the entire box set of 13 LPs in one day. I just couldn't get enough. From one sonata to the next, I was just transfixed because they were so different. They all had that very distinctive Beethoven personality, but I felt like I was hearing so many layers of the human experience going through it, and it just hit me in such a visceral way. And I was, it was such an important day for me because that's what inspired me to become a pianist in the first place, and to learn these sonatas. Those 32 gems were my first love, and the journey began from there. And then I always wanted to record all of the concerti after I recorded all of the sonatas. To me, that was a very personal project, and it had to be at the right time. And the fourth concerto, it's hard to pick a favorite out of the concerto, but the fourth I enjoy playing so much because it is very much about collaboration and about the give and take.
Mm.
And while the pianist has these incredible virtuosic um, aspects, there's a lot of listening that is going on. There's a very chamber-like atmosphere, especially in the first movement, and it's almost as if it becomes intimate, and then gradually it becomes more and more a piece for the audience. It's like the audience is somehow being seduced to what is going on, and by the time everyone is on the same page, it becomes very festive and folk-like and dance-like right at the very end. It's like we're all on the same page. We're all in this together, and we're all taking that same journey, and everything is going to come out fine. Which seems like the most appropriate concerto for this time.
So, for a pianist with Beethoven, there's this kind of almost all encompassing sense, like, because it permeated every facet of of his output. Um, Now, whereas Beethoven with the trombone, it's something that's like almost like a highlighting of special moments, something that like really is so. But I don't. I mean that with kind of like incredible sincerity. It's
Of course, yeah.
something that like all of a sudden like this additional light shines on
Yeah.
its thing. So I wanted to ask you, Alain, about maybe like a specific moment. It's so difficult to do with something like the Fourth Concerto, which really has this very kind of Olympian scope to it. But is
Mhm.
there something when you think about the Fourth Concerto, Alain, like a moment that maybe you direct an audience member to, or just kind of to listen for?
Yes, absolutely. Right off the top, I mean, the beginning, exactly like Stewart said, it starts, and it is the perfect piece to play in these times because it starts very, very intimate, and it becomes chamber music, and then it's like duos and trios, and then a little bit of this and a little bit of that, a little bit of orchestra, and nothing. There's no grandioso in it before. Very well, not at all. Actually, it's really about the collaboration, the music. It's really the concept of saying we're playing chamber music at a large scale, which is kind of a utopia, but we can actually live it in that concerto. Because the pianist is actually it's a kind of an obligato instrument. Mind you, it has an incredible solo part, but it almost cannot be played if you don't have all the components. Some concertos you can play a Chopin concerto, like Chopin even transcribed for a smaller group just with strings or even with a quartet. But Beethoven concerto, every voice has a reason to be there. Then it's very important that it's that voice. A clarinet voice has to be the clarinet,
That
because that's
timbre,
that
yeah.
voice at that point. And also at the time where it was written, it was a time where the woodwind instrument, you talk about trombone, okay, I'm a trombone player and I understand. But it was a time where the woodwind instrument were starting to have a real soloistic voice within the orchestra, and within, especially though I said clarinet, but clarinet was, it was very popular at that time. But all the woodwind instruments, they were starting to take a place of their own. We even here in the earlier symphony, we've had that talk before in one of those pre-concert chat that, a reviewer said that Beethoven's only flaw in his first symphony is that there were too many woodwind solos, but, reviewers. So at the same time, it evolved, and the place of those instruments became very important. It's a continuity of of the message, and that's really important. And the first movement is a real great example of that. I don't know any other concerto that has that much involved between soloist, players, soloist, and then pianist, and then this. And that's very interesting to hear. And you can follow it very well on the streaming, because then you have a close up of everything, and it's not so big that you're not missing that you don't have this sound, right? You have the sound, that the message is really what's the most important thing in this. Contrary to, like, in our century, very often the media becomes the message,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And in Beethoven, the message is the message.
Right.
And that's there's nothing wrong with the other one. I mean, it's just different times, and we've seen so much in the last 250 years that it's normal that the media becomes a little bit more the message sometimes, because the media has evolved, and the media is in a way a bit of a message in itself. But that's another discussion also. But that's what I see. But just to finish off, I've had my first epiphany of saying, maybe maybe music is more than just playing your instrument, doing all of that. First time I conducted Beethoven Fifth. I mean, it sounds tacky, but you start the piece, and it's not really the first movement. It's not that. It's the whole thing, and it's like the way it brings, and it has trombones, right? It's the real introduction of the trombone in a symphony. Mozart had it many times before, Monteverdi also, but in masses and in piece with chorus. But in a symphony, it was like, whoa, something happened there. But it actually heard, when I hear, we understand he couldn't hear, but his inner self, that's even more impressive, said, I need to have this. And that's the thing with Beethoven. He always exactly knows the experience that's coming. He's really in touch with his own self and his experience. And what I found is that in the audience, people feel that it touches some of their personal experience. For me, as you know, I talk about it many times, Beethoven is the most personal of composer, even though it's grandiose sometimes. It's just that he shows you that whatever you're feeling, he's felt it already somewhere. There's something, there's entire humanity in this guy. It was a very awkward guy, but there's so much humanity in him. And that's actually how Stewart and I met, is playing Beethoven. I was at National Art Center first time, I think.
That's
Kind of a
right.
blind date on Beethoven
That's
3.
right. The third
Yeah.
concerto.
And then with my orchestra in Laval, and here. But next time it has to be your piece.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah.
It's funny because the last performance with us was Beethoven. I think it was the fifth piano concerto. So we're just working our way through, but
Yes.
definitely looking forward to extending kind of that history of collaboration with you to include these wonderful pieces of yours coming up. So I just wanted to thank all of you for this. Maybe any last words to the listeners for this concert that you wanted to share? Alain, maybe first.
Well, I would say that it's interesting because we have a part of concert which is newer music. But let's go inside each of those pieces and find that emotion,
Mhm.
which we can see we can relate a little bit more. We can always relate those emotions together. It's not just the language, but it's the meaning of the words.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, and Stuart, you're actually getting the chance to work. Unfortunately, Alain is on the other side of the border, which is a real pity. But you get the chance to work again with somebody who I believe you've worked with a couple of times, and we've had the chance to work with as well. In Bill Eddins, also a composer, conductor, a pianist as well.
Yes.
What's your experience been working with Bill? How many times has that happened?
We worked together quite a few times. A few times at the Edmonton Symphony. We
Uh-huh.
did the three piano concerto by Beethoven. We did the two piano concerto of Poulenc
Uh-huh.
and the Shostakovich second concerto. So that was a lovely, like an artist
Yeah.
in residence kind of festival. And we did Ravel's concerto in G together
Mm.
in St. Louis. So yeah, very much looking forward to working with Bill again.
There's something about bringing together people who've had that sort of history
Mm.
together, and it's just great to see all of this history on the screen, and so looking forward very much to this, and I hope that you guys will um, be able to kind of bring all of that history and that familiarity and to bear in this collaboration and upcoming ones. So thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.